Hello, I want to talk to you again and give you another talk on hope. As human beings, we can build things up, and even the most simple and mundane things in everyday life, we build those up to such a level where we expect everything to be just right and perfect with it. And then when even the slightest thing goes wrong, we can so easily descend into a downward spiral of despair, void of all hope. Knowing that, what are we then to make of a full-blown pandemic that is affecting every single person in this world? Where is our hope to come from? I don't know if any of you are familiar with the play Waiting for Godot. The two main characters in this play wait expectantly for someone called Godot to arrive. They both claim him as an acquaintance, but in fact they hardly know him, admitting they would not recognise him were they to see him. And in one scene, one of the men peers out into the audience and he just comments onto the bleakness of his surroundings. He wants to leave where he is, but he's told he can't because he must wait for Godot. Both men are initially full of hope, but in the end are only left with a feeling of hopelessness because Godot isn't coming. In our current situation, is a cure, a vaccine to the COVID-19 virus coming? Or are we just simply looking into the darkness? I believe there will be a cure, but whilst we wait, we're just left seemingly to peer into empty darkness. Or are we? One of my favourite books of the Bible is Ecclesiastes. A strange choice, you might think, because at first glance you think it purely a polemic against life itself, written and articulated by someone who has an axe to grind with the world, or is just simply beaten and trodden down in life and has no hope. The reason I find this book so wonderful is the way it's written. It's gritty, it's cynical in places, but it does fill me with hope. Let me tell you why. In Ecclesiastes, 26 times we hear the term, "There is nothing new under the sun." A term or a simile used by us all at times to describe how we've all seen everything before and nothing can surprise us in life, and regardless of what we do, things will always be the same. They'll always be as they are. It's a bit like what I call the Victor Meldrew approach, one that I'm sometimes particularly proficient at. It's a cynical, weary and irascible view of life. But if we dig a little deeper, what we discover is that the writer of Ecclesiastes is describing what the world looks like with God taken out of the picture. God taken out of the picture. And the writer is doing what the words of the John Lennon song says. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. It's a wonderful song, but I'm afraid it's just not true in any sense because the world is full of those bits in between. And we've got quite a big bit in between facing us at the moment, haven't we? It's not a lot of good in situations like we're in now if our political leaders tell us everything will be rosy when it's pretty obvious they're not. It's not a lot of point adopting an ostrich syndrome and burying our heads in the sand when things happen to us. When they do, when we're really up against it, then that reveals where we have invested our hope. And for me, Ecclesiastes brings that sharply into perspective, and I thank God for that. Let me recommend that you try and read it. It's a book that can be read actually in one sitting. I think you might be surprised. And if you read the book, I think you'll find it won't just leave you hopeless, but rather the opposite. There's the message that God is our hope, and ultimately the only one we can rely on. He's our hope for the future, but it's built on a solid foundation. It's hope that will fill your heart and lift your eyes, because as God says to his people, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Amen.